Well, it's funny because me and a couple of the marks that I grew up with being wrestling fans, we bring down a different wrestler like once every month or so. And we'll bring them down, we'll put them up in a hotel, we take them to this steakhouse, this Brazilian steakhouse, and we sit and have a dinner for a couple hours, and they tell us all the stories.
That's amazing.
And these guys, once they're involved in wrestling, it's like everything's a work to them. Their whole life, they just get so most of them just get so involved in the business that they everything is a work. Everything's pro wrestling, and it's like everything's just getting over. Everything's trying to stay kayfabe on certain things, and
Yeah.
some of these guys take it so seriously. I remember, my one friend will go find the guys and get them to commit to doing it, and then they'll like send me the information. I'll book their flight, and he sends me over the information. We're having Nikita Koloff down one time, and he sends me his information. It's Nikita Koloff. Here's the airport he wants to come out of. And I text my friend back. I'm like, yeah, I think American Airlines is probably going to want his real name, not Nikita Koloff. I think it was like Sean Simpson or Scott Simpson or something. He's like, no, that's his real name. He was like so into his angle. He changed his name. When he came down, he told us he didn't speak English for years. He just did not break character.
Wow.
Unbelievable how married some of these guys get to
This story's so
business.
funny because Conrad Thompson told me a similar story before he was doing his podcast. He was like, I wonder if we could like pay a wrestler their appearance fee to come like watch the Royal Rumble with us. And as you know, it's pretty easy to just be like, hey, what's your rate? Okay, great. Let's do it. And
I mean, that's how most of these old guys make their livings now. They go and they'll do like Comic Cons and some conventions once in a blue moon that they have them, but they do appearances and they hustle. And I've probably brought, I think it's like 85 guys down over the years. I mean, mention someone from the 70s and 80s. I've had them down.
so I could have like some legendary wrestler like hang out at my bachelor party.
Absolutely. It's an easy gig for us because we just want to hear the stories.
Seriously, yeah.
But I mean,
easy gig for them too.
you go back to the Terry Funks and the Ric Flairs, and I mean, throw a name out. I've had 85 guys down.
Who did you think
dinner.
who was like the person you didn't think you'd be able to get? And then you were like, oh wow, we're making this happen?
Man, just about everybody we've tried to get, we've been able to get. We missed out on a couple, and the life expectancy of these old wrestlers based on the lives that they lived back then,
Yeah.
unfortunately isn't as long as some others. So we've missed out on some, but I always wanted to get Roddy Piper. Never able to get it lined up. That was like the one I really wanted. I really wanted Ole Anderson because he was just such an old, miserable dude. And, you hear the stories from everybody. And we always ask the wrestlers that are there, like, lots of questions, standard questions. But one of them is always like, at the end of your career, who'd you look back on and say, God, the guy was the biggest jerk I ever met in the business. And so many people say Ole. And I just think it was because he just had his ways and he was so old school and he ruled his company with an iron fist when he was booking it. And he rubbed some people the wrong way. And I just thought, man, he'd be great. Cause like the old miserable
Yeah.
guys coming, they're not going to, sugarcoat anything. They're going to tell you exactly like it is. So I thought he would have been a great dinner. But then, by the time we were able to coordinate, he was just getting the early onset of dementia. He couldn't travel. But um, those are the two that I missed out on.
Who was the one that like you didn't want the night to end? Like it was so good.
It's amazing how many guys fit that bill.
Mm.
There's some that you would have expected that were like that.
Like Flair, probably.
Um,
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I mean, Ric Flair's probably the greatest of all time, but we always friends and I like rank our dinners from like
Oh.
the best being 1 and the worst being like 80 or 85. And Ric Flair was like in the bottom 5. He
Wow.
who knows? They're doing something different every day. You get them on good days and get them on bad days. It's like a lot of the guys, they just want to come and they don't mind sharing their stories and
Yeah.
telling you the great stories and they get into it, enjoy it. And most of them are like that. And he was just kind of like there for the payday and just didn't, I don't
Man.
know, didn't really care to share stuff with us
All
and
right,
just
give us-
kind of kayfabed us.
Give us your top 5 then.
Best 5 ever. Ted DiBiase was crazy good.
And it's evident that everybody does indeed have a price.
Oh man, he was so good. We drove him back to the hotel after dinner and he's like, I don't fly out till tomorrow morning, man. I got plenty more stories. I'll sit here in the car and tell them to you all night. He was amazing. He was so good. We brought him back a couple years later with Stan Hansen to do it because they had a
wow.
great tag team in Japan and they got to tell great stories together. He was great. Ken Patera surprised the hell out of me because I remember him obviously when he was wrestling, but I don't remember him being so charismatic and stuff. He was more just that big, tough heel, and he was crazy good with his stories. Terry Taylor was great because he still works in WWE developmental, so He can tell the stories comparing the old territories and how everything was when he was coming up in the business with how the business is now and training the guys like inside of a, a more sterile environment, than the territories. These guys back when they were on the road in the day, these guys would go from territory to territory, and every territory was different with their style and their fans and their approach to wrestling. So, and then every night when the show was over, they'd take the new guys and they'd put you in the car with a veteran, and you would drive that veteran to the next town so he could teach you, the business.
Yeah.
So he'd sit there and just pound beers the whole way from, Fort Lauderdale up to Tampa if you were in Florida Championship Wrestling, or much longer rides if you were like in Mid-South or in one of the Texas promotions. So you would learn different territories, different styles. You'd be around the veterans on the long drives every night, and they'd be telling you all the stories on the road and teaching you. And now these wrestlers, they're nipped out of college if they're a college wrestler, or if they're an actor that wants to get into it, and they're putting a performance center in Orlando,
Yeah.
and they're taught, and they got their ring and they practice promos and they're doing everything. And it's just such a different, a different learning curve and experience. So it was really cool hearing his stories and him comparing the different times,
That's a great first three. I wouldn't have guessed any of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
You really wouldn't.
Give me some more. Who's two more?
Terry Funk was so good.
Okay, I
He
can
was-
imagine that one.
I mean, and every beer that got into his mouth was a greater story coming out of it. He was just a riot. And it's funny because some of the guys you think would be, oh, that guy's going to be so good. I can't wait. He was so good on the mic. He had so much personality. And then he gets there and it's like, oh shit, it's just in this scenario, in this environment or setting, they just, either they, maybe they don't want to tell their stories. Maybe they want to keep everything kayfabe even all these years later. And then you get guys that you're thinking, oh, well, he wasn't, that Ronnie Garvin wasn't, the most entertaining wrestler on the microphone. He was just the tough guy with the Garvin stomp and always going to keep fighting. He gets in front of you in dinner and he was just amazing. And then you get a guy like Bill Dundee, who I thought was going to be crazy good because he booked in a bunch of territories and he was so good on the mic, and he was in Memphis for all those years. And it was such a crazy promotion. He didn't really want to tell stories about much. It's just kind of there to have dinner and get through it. So it's like some of them really surprise you.
Yeah.
Robert Fuller was probably one of my top 5 dinners. His stories, he was like, I could be a stand-up comedian. He told some stories that just, oh my God, that is so funny. So he was amazing.
I don't know if you want to say or not. And if you don't, that's okay. But who was the most expensive?
Flair.
Okay. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe it's so funny. He's the most expensive and then he's in your bottom 5.
It's just, you just never know.
I had a great interview with him about a month or 2 ago, right before Ric Flair's last match. And I felt so grateful because I feel like what you say is true. I've heard that, good day or bad day, it could be a great experience or it could just be okay.
Man, I was so excited for the dinner. And even though it wasn't a good dinner, I'm still glad I did it. It's Ric Flair. I got to have dinner with Ric Flair and hear his stories, even if he was rushing through them and probably lying through half of them because he didn't want to tell us anything. And whatever, it's still Ric Flair,
Can people do the same with you? Could people pay your booking rate?
Yeah, what's my booking rate?
I don't know. You tell me. You're doing like
you get what you pay for. It's about 0.